Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Music by the Book series. And we have, of course, a special presentation. Most of you know we have Dr. Ivor Miller with us today, and he'll be talking about his new book, The Sacred Language of the Abakuá. And before we get started, I just need to make a shout out to our funders. The Bronx Music Heritage Center programming is supported in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the New York State Legislature, public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Lily Auchincloss Foundation, the Laurium Tisch Illumination Fund, and for this program especially we have funding from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment for its Music Month, which they had for half the year actually due to the pandemic. So again, thank you everyone for coming in tonight to this discussion, this interview. We are going to start just a few ground rules. Ivor has a short presentation. He's going to talk a little bit about his book, and we're also going to talk a little bit about not just his book, but looking at how, as many of you know, the Abakuá tradition is reflected and influenced in popular music and the popular music from Cuba. And so he's gonna touch upon some of them. We're gonna hear some music. I'm asking everyone during this part, during the presentation, if everyone can please mute themselves, mute their audio. We don't want any TV shows coming on in the middle of it or anything. Mute their audio and mute your video. And then if you have any questions, put them in the chat and I will make sure we get to all of them. And then later on, we'll come back to all of you and we'll turn everyone on and you can ask your questions then. But for now, let's just keep Ivor and Bobby on the screen. And Bobby, I think I'm echoing off yours. And then just keep them on the screen. If everyone can mute themselves and take off their video, and we'll just have, as I mentioned, Ivor and Bobby on the screen. But to start with, everyone, I'm just going to make a really brief introduction. Again, most of you know him, our speaker for today, Ivor Miller. He is a senior lecturer in the Department of History and International Studies at the University of Calabar in the Cross River State in Nigeria. He holds a research fellowship from the African Studies Center at Boston University, and he is the author of quite a spectrum of books: The Voice of the Leopard, African Secret Societies in Cuba, which is sort of ethnography and a mix of ethnography and history about the Abakuá Society, and he's also the author of Aerosol Kingdom, Subway Painters of New York City. And today we are going to be talking about his newest book, The Sacred Language of the Abakuá, which was co-edited, translating Lydia Cabrera's work, which hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit about her later as well. And he co-edited that with P. Gonzalez Gomez Caceres. So with that, I want to introduce first now to you Bobby Sanabria, the other artistic director of the Bronx Music Heritage Center, so he can open up the program with Ivor.
Thank you so much, Elena. Everybody, bienvenidos, saludos amigos, como dice el gran Umbando Lasalle de Puerto Rico. Say hello to my little friend here. This is a small visual representation of what is known as an ireme in the sacred religion and brotherhood known as Abakuá. Our guest is more than qualified to speak on the subject. I would say he's the preeminent scholar on this incredible tradition. Again, as I said, it is a religion, and it is also a brotherhood, a sacred brotherhood, which is incredibly fascinating. And much of their music, much of their language has crept or really is part of our everyday colloquial Spanish. Words like chévere, bonco, hacer. These are things that most New Yorkers of Latino descent from the Caribbean use in everyday colloquial speech. But do you know where these words actually come from? Do you know the language they come from? In Africa. Well, to expound on that and much more is our honored guest, Professor Ivor Miller. He's a fascinating gentleman with a fascinating backstory himself. It's an honor to have you here, Professor Miller. We know each other for quite some time. We always have a great time when we speak. And I always learn when I speak with you so much. And we're so glad that you're here to expound on this great cultural tradition. I just wanted to ask you, before we begin and before we start with your presentation, how did you first become aware of this great cultural tradition that, correct me if, well, basically it's only found on the island of Cuba. Please expound on that if you can. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to everyone for coming tonight to support us in this project, which is an ongoing project. The project started 30 years ago, and it's still going on. It's like Alpha and Omega. There's no beginning or end to this. And Lidi Cabrera is one of the greatest scholars of this tradition, and so it's just such an honor to
It's our book.
work with her and help get her work out into the Anglophone world. And I have to thank the NEH because we did the translation thanks to an NEH support. We are now doing that's the Lengua Sagrada. We're now doing La Sociedad Secreta Abakuá, the second book. And these two books are intertwined because the sacred language is the vocabulary that she created through her research on Abakuá, which came out in the monumental La Sociedad Secreta Abakuá. And tonight I'm also representing my co-translator, Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, and our linguist at large, Dr. Victor Manfredi. So what we did with this book, I was researching in Cuba for many years, and I began life as a Yoruba scholar because Yoruba people were in the US talking about their heritage and culture. And when I went to Havana in 1990, I met an elder gentleman of Calabari descent. The Calabari are the people from the port of Calabar who were forced migrants, along with all the other Africans, or most of the other Africans. And I worked with this gentleman, Andres Flores Casanova, for over 7 years, and that became the basis of my book, The Voice of the Leopard. But as a researcher, you quickly learn that the work that we're doing is based on the earlier work of Fernando Ortiz and Lidia Cabrera. So as a scholar trying to go deeper and deeper, I'm obliged to work with the legacy of Lidia Cabrera, who I call the Homer of the Caribbean, La Homera del Caribe, because she worked with the oral traditions of Africans and their descendants in a very respectful way. And she worked on basically most of the African traditions of Cuba, Arara, Congo, Carabali, Lukumi, and so on. So I had studied with Robert Ferris Thompson, which is the intellectual genius, the Elegua, who showed the way. And basically, I took one chapter of his book, Flash of the Spirit, which is about the Abakuá Carabali tradition, and I worked with that. Uh, I was lucky to have been living in Calabar since 2004 for 15 years.
And let me interrupt you just for a second, respectfully. Someone has their microphone on their computer. Please mute your microphone. As Elena said, she didn't want to hear any car horns or anything like that. And of course, we heard one right there. So please,
Okay,
I know it
so
was just an oversight, but please mute your microphones. Thank you
yeah.
so much.
So basically, as a scholar of today, I learned that we have our work. We're standing on the shoulders of our elders, and that elder is Lydia Cabrera, as well as Robert Ferris Thompson, who worked with Lydia. She actually dedicated a book to him, and Fernando Ortiz, and several others too. And this La Lengua Sagrada is a vocabulary that has over 6,000 entries. Some of them are only one word. Some of them are very long passages or encames, recitations.
Here's a copy of the book right here.
Yeah, that's the original one.
Yep.
And you see the firma, the gourd on this. We reproduced that for our new book, and then we put photographs from Africa and Cuba to show that this gourd represents the sacred mother, Sikan, the mythic founder of the society, and that's her womb from which initiates are reborn as members. And so there's a lot of very interesting issues about gender that come into this work, and cultural continuity. And I basically fell in love with the Abakuá tradition because it's such a wonderful model of African continuity in the Americas, but not only continuity, but also adaptation and innovation. Because what I learned from working in Africa is that there's no one original source. There are many variations. The Cross River region is one of the most linguistically diverse regions on the planet. Depending on how you define a language, one can say there's 50 languages there or 2 or 3 dozen languages. So how did people communicate in that kind of situation? They had the Ekpe Leopard Society, which was the system of community justice, which has its own codes of communication. And that's how they could have trade routes and keep peace in their communities. And Bobby, the book you have in your hand, Ana Foroana, is an example of those communication codes. This is another classic by Cabrera that has over 500 signs. Now, the signs in Cuba, as documented by Cabrera, are not the same as in Africa. They're similar, but what we begin to see is that in the Caribbean, the cultures got adapted and they grew and they got intensified. And that's such an amazing story, to the point that I argue that in some cases, Lidia Cabrera's documentation of African heritage in the Caribbean is useful to people in Africa to understand their own history. And that's another conversation that we can get into. So
I just wanted to ask you real
yeah.
quick for the uninitiated, in terms of like when you mentioned the Cross River region. For those of who are attending right now and know nothing about this culture, nothing about African geography, where specifically is the Cross River region?
Yeah, the Cross River region is on the border of Cameroon and Nigeria, in coastal. It's on the border of Central and West Africa. Cameroon is Central Africa, Nigeria is West Africa. And the Germans and British just split the region, which is one cultural civilization. They split it in two, and they've been separated in many ways since then. But it's a cultural whole, and they all share the Ekpe Leopard Society. So now Ekpe is a system for men, but they also have very powerful women's societies. So Abakuá has gained a kind of sinister reputation in the Caribbean because, they don't let women in. Well, that's easy to understand because more men than women were enslaved, and the men brought their systems, and the women tended to go more into the Ocha, Lukumi, Santeria systems. So there's a lot of very powerful issues of women's power in this book, The Sacred Language of Abakuá, and other works by Lidia Cabrera, which to me are fascinating to bring out and understand issues of male groups and female groups in West Africa. And we find the same thing in the Yoruba system as well. So since this book has over 6,000 entries that refer to ritual language, and since the ritual language has been the basis for popular music because Abakuá musicians were so prominent in popular music of Havana especially, and I have to say Ignacio Piñero, who was known as the poet of the son because he had over 200 compositions. He founded the Septeto Nacional. He was a member of Efore Como, and I learned recently in research in Havana that he played with many of his lodge members, doing coro de clave or other rumba traditions long before he was ever recorded. So one can say that his lodge was prominent in the evolution of son in Havana by integrating the rumba and the son together. And there are many other examples, which I hope we'll get into through the music I want to play.
It's interesting you talked about the journey of the Leopard Society, or the root of it, coming to Cuba, and how, because there were more men than women, that transference of the women societies, secret societies, didn't really happen. When I was performing with many years ago with Mongo Santa Maria, we talked a lot about Abakuá, etc.
Yeah.
And also a good friend of mine was Virgilio Marti, who was
Yes.
also Abakuá, and we
Yes.
worked a lot together on the bandstand, and we were friends.
Yeah.
So Mongo had told me about that there were women's societies, but he goes that he goes as you said, not that much. He mentioned Bricamo. Is that Bricamo part of this
Yeah.
representation of the
Yeah.
women's societies?
Bricamo, because the Abakuá say Bricamo Manyongo, Bricamo Karabali. That means we speak Bricamo,
Okay.
meaning that when all these cross river people came into Cuba and other parts of the Caribbean, because there is a Carabali diaspora all over the Caribbean, which is still unknown, and I write about this in the intro. We have examples in Haiti, Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico, and Brazil, and so on. Bricamo is so there. Some people spoke Igbo, some people spoke Efik, some people spoke Balondo, and Ekoi, and so on. But Bricamo was the language chosen because, according to the myth, Bricamo comes from Usagare, which is the mythic homeland. And the painting behind me shows the foundation of Abakuá in Usagare, which is on the coast of the Cross River in Cameroon. So the Bricamo tradition was maintained by the Calle family of urban Matanzas, because Abakuá was founded in Havana and then moved to Matanzas pretty soon after. And the Calle family are very famous in the rumba, in the Bricamo tradition. And as I understand it, the Bricamo tradition was basically for funerary rites, and it was run by women, who, as we know, are very powerful,
right?
In Matanzas especially. So yeah, there's a whole lot of history. I mean, we could do a whole program on Abakuá music in New York and the Bronx, definitely.
We definitely, well, with now that you said that, we'll do
Yeah,
it. We'll do it. So
yeah.
this is
I
just
mean,
the first of an exploration of
what I wanted to show tonight was some of the key foundational tracks,
fantastic.
Cuba and a little bit of Africa, and so on. So what else?
Before you do it, just real quick again for those of the viewers that know nothing at all, when you say the leopard societies, do you mean that they worshipped the leopard as an iconic figure, as a spirit?
I mean that the leopard is the totem of the society. What does the leopard represent?
Mm,
We're talking about people who live in the forest,
mhm.
in small communities. The Yorubas had big empires and standing armies. The people in the Cross River had small villages, and they were in the forest. The leopard is a very dangerous animal.
Right.
People lived in small communities to protect themselves because leopards would come in and get the goats in the center of town. So a hunter who could kill a leopard, imagine, before there were rifles or anything, a guy with a spear became a hero in the community.
Mm.
The leopards, like any cat, they live at night. That means their eyes can see in the dark. They see the mysteries of the night. They're camouflaged so they can't be seen. Leopards are also solitary animals, and they're even though the lion is stronger, the leopard can, because of its strategies, it's very cautious. It doesn't go into a battle it can't win. All these qualities make the leopard a powerful totem for the elders of the society who make decisions on how to keep the peace in the community. So it's a royal society. From the Congo all the way into Nigeria and perhaps beyond, whenever a leopard was killed traditionally, it had to be taken to the paramount ruler of the area. If the leopards belonged to the king.
Mm.
Or it could be the queen too, whoever the paramount is. So the leopard is a symbol of royalty. It's at the top of the food chain. And when Ekpe makes a decision, it's a final decision. So that's what the leopard means. And it's called Ekpe in Efik. In Cuba, it's known as Ekwe. Ekwe. Chaviaka Mokongo Machevere. Ekwe Ekwe. So the name of Ekwe is inside the Abakuá society very, very deeply.
It's also the name of a particular drum as well, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but it's the name of, the voice of the leopard
I see. I
is
see.
referred to as Ekwe.
Okay.
So it's the mystic sound. It's the mystic leopard.
Fantastic. Well, you have a presentation you want to give us right now. So,
Well, I kind of gave it already. Why don't we start in with, I wanted to show some tracks that relate to the entries. And one of the entries is Amanambe, Amanambe, which means twins. Amanambe, Amanamba. We are twins. We're initiated. We're brothers. And according to the myth, this goes way back to the spirits of Tanse, the sacred fish, the fish that was a royal ancestor who came out of the water, was discovered by Sikan, the royal princess, and their spirits are united. So Amanamba, Amanambe. And Ignacio Pinheiro wrote a song called Efi and Moro, which was recorded in 1936 that has this. So let's listen to it for a sec, and then I'll kind of explain what it is.
Great. Fantastic.
Jorge, could we hear that, please? Thank you. So I have spent a lot of time with Abakuá specialists in Havana to transcribe these tracks, and I have a book, many years in production, about a history of popular music in Cuba with Abakuá content, and also Puerto Rico and other places too. So what we're hearing here is Ereno Bon Fembe, Mukarara Krukuro. Ereno Bon is black man. Fembe is positive. Mukarara is white man. Krukuro is together. Black and white, positive, and together. Amanamba Manambe, we are twins. Okobio Abakuá and Bemoro. So Amanamba Manambe is twin. And we did an analysis thanks to many people in West Africa who identify the language, and Amanambe means twin in the Efik language. Unity. And if you go to Manfredi's etymology, you're going to find that entry. We have a list of terms. So it's a very interesting song because we see the conservation of terms from West Africa, but we see them being used in an innovative way in the Caribbean. And the story behind this is that the lodge Efi and Bemoro, from an Efik lineage, was created in the 1860s or something. And then at some point, a lot of the members died, and it was recreated by bringing in new people. And a lot of white guys joined that lodge. And so what they're saying is that the whites and the blacks are united through the sacred initiation. They are ritual brothers. And they use the term Amanambe to make that known. So that's a great example of how Ignacio Pinheiro recorded the history of the social popular classes in Cuba through the popular music.
Fantastic. I have a request from my co-artistic director, Elena Martinez. If everyone could please, what do you want them to do, Elena?
Shut off their video until the Q&A.
Oh, okay. If you could shut off your video until the Q&A, please. Okay. Not you, Dr. Malova. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Since the Abakuá are known to be, well, at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, I would say they were they're semi-secret now. I mean, because so much of it has been exposed to tourists
Mm.
that come go to Cuba, etc. And we have great popular musicians like Pedrito Martinez, who is Abakuá, etc., out there representing on a grand scale. When Ignacio Piñero did these recordings,
Mhm.
did he meet with any resistance at the time?
Definitely, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, the according to Lydia Cabrera's work, when the Carabali Cabildos were functioning, that's from the 1700s up until the Cabildos were banned in 1884 or something. Um, they did not want to, they had ECPE inside those Cabildos. There were definitely ECPE members from Africa there. They didn't trust their children with this very, intimate information. So
Wow.
they waited many generations before they created Abakuá for their children, because Ekpe is the African version. Abakuá, the first Abakuá lodge was created in the early 1800s with the name Efike Buton, which is named after the Obuton community of Calabar. And they created that for their children, but they had to wait many years and figure out which ones were going to be responsible with this knowledge so
Mm.
they use it properly, because it's a judicial system. It was it's a historical narrative to challenge the narrative of the colonists that Africans are slaves and savages. They say the Abakuá tradition, as Congo and Lukumi says, we are royal people. We come from royal lineages. We have, deep philosophies about life, and this is who we are. And that struggle is still on today in the educational systems of our Americas, right?
Right. Right.
So,
So the so the
yeah,
in the original lodge or potencia that was formed in Cuba, so they only would allow, correct me again if I'm wrong, please. They would only allow people that had directly come from Africa to be
yeah,
members. In other words, if you were a criollos born on the island of Cuba
yeah.
from somebody who was an Abacuá member, they still would not allow you in.
That's when the first lodge was created, Ifike Butong. That's when the Creoles were trained and took possession of, they became independent.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that grew many other lodges.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a wonderful story. Um, and of course, no, this has come out only after 100 years of silence, because the police were persecuting them as criminals. Why were they persecuted? Because in a slave society, Black men who were organized and in solidarity were seen as criminal, because the colonial masters wanted them all,
Subservient, yeah.
divide and conquer.
Mm-hmm.
So the Abakuá has had a legend of being criminals that's still with them till today, because they're a threat by having a mutual aid society to defend themselves, because Abakuá is exactly that, a mutual aid society. It's for solidarity. They pay for each other's burial fees. They support each other when there's illness or there's a family problem. That's what Abakuá does in the society, and that's why it was so important to the workers in Havana and Matanzas.
Fantastic. Now, in terms of the language itself, the way it is spoken in Cuba, how close is it to the original language in the Cross River region? Is it, would
Yeah.
you say it's creolized, or it's very close, almost completely
Well, I mean,
intact?
that's one of the things we're trying to understand. I mean, we're dealing with something that was hidden. I mean, when Ortiz wrote his first books, he was saying we don't understand what this is. They were called ñañigos, which is a Creole term for Abakuá, which Abakuá reject as pejorative. And we're still in the process of understanding. So that's what our book tries to do, is look at how much of this is identified as African easily. And that's what Manfredi does in his etymology. And there's a lot we don't know. There's definitely a lot of innovation because the Caribbean is all about hybridity and innovation, but there's also a lot of conservative maintenance of tradition. So all that's going on. And because there are very few languages in the Cross River that have dictionaries, Efik is the only one that really has it, Efik and Ibibio. There's still a lot we don't know about West Africa because they're still trying to overcome the legacy of colonial,
Right.
colonial, ya tu sabes. It's no es fácil.
Yeah.
Excuse me for 1 second. Excuse me for 1 second. I know we were going to wait to the questions for later, but since you already started talking about Pinheiro, John Santos asked in the chat, can you continue and tell us more about what you were talking about, the resistance that Pinheiro encountered when he was denied in the plaza?
Okay, that's yeah. Sorry, I got off track on that one, but you know, the best example. Well, Fernando Ortiz documents in 1926 some Abakuá and Guanabacoa tried to have a theater about Abakuá, and they were shut down by the Abakuá themselves. And when Ignacio Pinheiro taught Maria Teresa Vera songs in Abakuá, which she sang beautifully, that became a problem because the Abakuá were saying, "This is a men's society. Why is a woman doing it publicly? Not cool." And that's a well-documented issue. So I talk about that in Voice of the Leopard, I believe.
Great.
But yeah,
but, I mean, just the fact that he recorded these songs, it must have been like they must have gone into an uproar.
What's so interesting to me about the early discography of Cuban music is that the first Abakuá songs were trovador. It was a guitar duo, guitar and clave and voice, kind of a Spanish troubadour style. And then by the 1990s, you get Yoruba and Dabo doing straight up percussion only Abakuá ceremonial stuff. So that shows you the repression against this, whether it was from the conservative Abakuá themselves or the society in general that thought drums were, you know, savagery.
Right.
So we all know the story of how long it took the bongo to get in music, and then the tumbador that you know, was brought into the conjuntos. Everything happens over time because there's so many prejudices in the society.
Right. Well, continuing on that theme, just real quick, I want you to continue, obviously, playing these great examples that you've picked of the music and popular culture. Keeping in that line with the Abakuá themselves being protesting against their music, their culture being represented on recordings, and the prejudice that mainstream Cuban society had against them, particularly in La Habana with the government. They became a socio-political force of nature, right? In terms of like politicians had to, so to speak, when they ran for public office, had to cater to these communities, speak to them, etc.
Yes, there's the book Enrique Sosa, Ñáñigo, which won an award in 1982 in the Casa de las Americas. He has examples of that. Politicians are using Abakuá language on their, you know, calling cards to get people who are Carabali people to vote for them.
Right.
So, yeah, it's well, you know, the more I learn about this, the deeper it goes. I mean, it's really interesting. Yoruba is much more popular, much more known, but when you look at the discography of Caribbean and Cuban music, Congo is at the center, and then Carabalí is coming in. Yoruba becomes, you know, there's references to Yoruba little bit by little, but that really happens in the second half of the 20th century where it becomes prominent. So I want to play a track from Africa since we're trying to talk about African continuity in the Caribbean. I just want to play. I've been collecting music from Calabar for many years, trying to do a comparative study. And I just want to show one example. And this example is a group. It's called the Efik Cultural Research Party. And the group is called Nka Ikemisit Ima. Nka means group. Ikemisit means one heart. And Ima means love. So what this group is saying, we have one heart, we're one mind. And this becomes very important in Abakuá rituals because there are rituals that have the four lodge leaders, Iyamba Mokongo, Isunekwe, and Isue, perhaps. They do something where all of them do something together to show they have one mind, because a group that has people going in different directions can't function. They have to work as one mind. So I wanted to just play this track that's saying we're a group of one heart for love, group of one heart for love. And it was recorded, I don't know, probably in the 70s in Calabar. Jorge, could we check it out, please?
Sin mama. Yeah. You call it sin mama. Yeah. I couldn't mama do. Yeah. Yeah. Abola wang kaima. Hey hey hey. Ala wang kaima. Igong kaima kan sentanga. Tampai zero tu chena bolo bo. Udong zero tu chena dongo bo. Igong ada ku folo paujo. Ima bari omoto nara. Dankai beri on atonara. Udo boye jogo jene kon komima. Gaison idame. Gaison idame. Udo de kan jengem so songode. Akula palawa akun gwa mafonti dede. Iya
So that gives you the idea, one heart. And that relates to an entry that's found on page 161, for those who want to check it out, Ibansune Ekwe Bonsiro, which is the Baroko Bonsiro of the four kings who become one through the ritual. About, when we're comparing Calabar music and Abakuá music, there are structural similarities. One of them is what we just heard. There's a preamble, a singing before the percussion starts. And so that's my example from Africa. There's a lot more coming out, and I have a lot of stuff on YouTube that people can check out too. But we have a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline.
If they wanted to check this out on YouTube, would they just type in your name, Ivor Miller?
Yeah, Ivor Miller, yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so and those who are interested in participating, we love collaboration, and we love interested people to help us hear stuff. So where do we go now? Should I play more music?
Of course. I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is for the people viewing that have seen representation of Abakuá culture on a stage in performance, like with los Muñequitos de Matanzas when they've come here to the United States, and other groups, Grupo Afro Cuba. The beautiful costumed iremes, this representation that I'm holding of my little friend here, who's looking at me right now, and he's looking at you, Ivor, and he's bowing to you, So tell us a little bit about what the costume represents, the hood, the hat in the back, okay, etc.
Wow.
There's a belt of bells that goes around the waist, when the ireme dances, etc. Can you tell us a little bit about that, so that for those who are curious and want to learn?
Okay, well, that's a beautiful question. I wish I could answer it fully, but it's like alpha and omega.
Right.
But basically, the mask is it's a code. It represents ancestors, no doubt that and there are many different types of masks. In West Africa, there's different types of masks. In Cuba, there's different types of masks. A lot of the old lodges have old masks that don't come out anymore with animal skins on them. So depending on the people in the Caribbean recreated things with the local materials as best they could. And but the masks basically across the board represent ancestors who are there to ensure that the rites are carried on according to the old traditions. Because the Africans in the Caribbean and in Africa hold the past. The past is utopia. And the people in the present must emulate the past as much as possible. That's why we have the rumba phrase, la rumba no es como ayer. The rumba should be like the elders did it in the past, you know? So Abakuá is always recreating its ritual performance, recreating its origins in West Africa as faithfully as possible. And the mask, you see it has no mouth. The mask does not speak. The mask speaks through its gestures, which are codes. Depending on the function of the mask, it could have a broom in the hand, it could have a green plantain, it could have a stick, it could have a rooster, depending on its function. But the mask, it has this kind of raffia on it, which is hennikin in the Caribbean. It's, that fiber, which represents the bush. It's a bush spirit. It's coming from the forest. El monte. Vamos para el monte. ¿Por qué? Porque el monte hay algo bueno. The monte is a place of medicines and healing, and the ancestors who support us. So there's that relationship to the sacred forest, the environment. So we have the indigenous ecology of Africa, which is in the Caribbean. The hat on the back represents, according to people I study with, represents a kind of a communication device, like an antenna to the astros, to the cosmos. So a lot of Abakuá is communicating with the planetary systems, the universe, the stars, the sun, the moon, all of that. Because there are rituals that happen in the day, there's rituals that happen in the night. You're working with the sun and the moon, forces of dark and light, male, female, life and death. The bells on it, the bells on the waist, are meant to scare away any negative forces. Purification, the mask is always positive, and it's there to ensure the rites are done correctly and to take away, to purify, to take away bad things. The mask does not have shoes because the feet must be in contact with the earth, which is our sacred planet and where the ancestors are. So I hope I gave you something there.
Thank you for opening up the door for educating all of us. What is the next recording that you have?
Okay, the next one we have is Jorge, número 9. This one is Afon Heriero Bonco. So this is showing Afon is good, Afon Heriero positive Bonco. The sound of the Bonco is beautiful and positive. We want to show how the ritual music is starting to enter popular music through this. And this is, I think it's
Yeah, Afon Heriero Bonco, Afon Heriero Bonco.
That was Chant Abakuá, recorded in 1964 by Danza Nacional. They were in Paris, and that was Jesus Perez Puentes, lead voice. He was an Abakuá member and one of the great bata players that came out of Pablo Roche's school in Guanabacoa. And, it's interesting to note that a lot of the bata greats were also Abakuá people. because they're both guilds. They're both male guilds and highly specialized in music. And that's another story. But all of these guys worked with Fernando Ortiz, and they were basically his teachers. So
Talking about Dr. Fernando Ortiz, who
yeah.
anybody who's a student of ethnomusicology knows who he is,
Mm-hmm.
the great author, etc. Wrote numerous volumes on not only just Afro-Cuban music, culture, ethnography, etc., etc. But how did they feel about him coming, as so to speak, a white Cuban coming in here and saying, "Hey, I want to learn about this. Can you share your knowledge with me, etc." And also, I'm fascinated by Lydia Cabrera, who's a woman.
Right.
I hate to use the word infiltrate, but for lack of a better term, coming in to
Yeah.
this realm and getting all this information, all this knowledge out there, or
Yeah.
some of it out there.
Yeah, it's complicated. Ortiz's work. Ortiz was a criminologist. We all know he wrote Los Negros Brujos, which was attacking the blacks basically.
Right, right, right.
For being sorcerers and so on. He grew out of that very quickly. I don't know how exactly he did, but by the 1920s and 30s, he was understanding that blacks are the core of Cuban. Without blacks, there is no Cuba.
Right.
The cuisine, the music, the language, the social networking, it's all African derived. And at a time when people were arguing that, Siboney, Los Indios are the soul of the nation, Lydia Cabrera said it's very easy to be an Indianist in Cuba because there aren't many Indians around. It's very hard to be an Africanist because people are so prejudiced against blacks, and it's like this is the air we breathe is African derived culture. So Robin Moore's book, Nationalizing Blackness, deals with a lot of these issues, and the Los Vanguardistas that emerged in the 20s, Alejo Carpentier, Ortiz, Amadeo Rodan, Cartula, musicians who were going to Abakuá plantes or ceremonies and trying to learn and understand to create a modern music that would reflect the Cuban nation, kind of following Dvorak, the Hungarian composer, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. So they did what they could, and Ortiz was respectful enough to these people like Pablo Roche, and they brought out the bata drum for the first time in 1937, and that's how the Lucumí culture started to come out in popular music through Gilberto Valdez, Obdulio Morales, who later on played with Catherine Dunham in New York. It's a big story, but they taught him just enough so he could write his books, but there was a lot they didn't teach him.
Right.
Because the Africans say, if you know 5 things, you teach 2 or 3. Because later on your student will try to tell you he knows more than you. So it's a very interesting story that I plan to treat in a book I'm writing about Bata and Jesus Perez. Right. But
would you say that Chano Pozo and his collaborations with Dizzy Gillespie is the first time that audiences in the United States heard anything related to Abakuá culture?
Yeah, I would say that I would argue that Machito was doing something in Tanga, Tanga. There's, he was from Jesus Maria, a very heavy Abakuá neighborhood. So there's, but he was more in the popular cultural, not the deep ritual stuff. But yeah, Chano turned things around. But I would like to right now go to your friend, Virgilio Martí, and play number 11, Acanapon, just to show. Acanapon is an entry on page 241, which means the sound of the voice. Acanapon eriero, the beautiful voice, just to show how Abakuá music is performed in rumba contexts. Let's hear a minute of
Ella va, ven cama, bese un cañón suave así. Eriemo mío, boneco, me tan caniriongo. Si no muta Abakuá, que eres fion, forian como eres meta. El de me fi, el de me fo, sangamo cumba. Bese un cañón suave así. Eriemo mío, boneco, me tan caniriongo. Si no muta Abakuá, que eres fion, forian como eres meta. El de me fi, el de me fo, sangamo cumba. Ah la 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 la, ah la la, ah la 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 la, ah la la la, ah la 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 la, ah la 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 la. Ekwe huyo ya kanapon, kama vivio kondo. Ekwe huyo ya kanapon.
What a beautiful singer Virgilio was, a great rumbero, great vessel of knowledge.
I love that guy.
Yeah.
In this track, he's doing an encame to say, I am a member of a Fori Como, because he's identifying who he is before he goes on. And that he was a member of the same lodge as Ignacio Piñero. One of the earliest lodges created in Cuba, 1840. It's one of the earliest ones that's still around. I want to go to track 14C, please. This is a compilation done by Kevin Moore out in California. Thanks to him, it starts with Muñoquitos and it goes to Pupi los que son to show how the timba players are getting stuff from the rumba.
I'm picturing Ignacio Piñero from Heaven smiling right now, telling his fellow brethren, you see, that's why I wanted to record this stuff, because wait till you see what happens later on with the music.
Well, over the generations, things have relaxed a little bit.
Right.
And in my own case, my luck has been that I was able to go to Africa and bring information. So instead of infiltrating or penetrating, as you say, like the police, I've been collaborating and sharing, and we're teaching each other. This track, Otoman Seruma Efo, that's the line that the Muñoquitos are saying. That's the original fundamental of Efo. They're talking about a myth from Africa. And then Pupi comes in with Iyamba Eruma Inyeni. He's kind of transforming because he doesn't understand the language, but he knows that the public is going to love it if there's a reference to Abakuá. So the timberos may not be members, but they're using it because the people love it. The dancing public loves it.
Right.
And so that's how that functions. Let's go to Chano Pozo, number 17A, please. Okay, I'm sorry. Jorge, could we go to the next one? Is 12. This is, I believe, Muñoquitos, and the line is Ekwe Sangabia, which is a reference to the African founders coming to Cuba. Ekwe Sangabia. if people are interested, I'm just pulling examples from the book, from the entries, because I'm referring to popular music. I can send people details later if they want, but Ekwe Sangabia Nipo Nipo is a chant used in ceremonies to narrate the Africans who were initiates who came to Cuba to set up, to found this culture. And because of these examples, in my work, I want to argue and show and document how Africans were pioneers of Caribbean societies. In our educational system, we hear about the Puritans, we hear about the conquistadores. We don't hear about the Africans as founders, and they were. And this is a beautiful example, and there are many others. So I hope the work I'm contributing to is going to change the history books and enter the curriculum. We can't hear you, Bobby.
I'm sorry, I was muted. You definitely have allies in us. We're getting the message across, and obviously everybody watching here tonight will hopefully do the same.
Yeah.
I meant to ask you about the evolution really quick.
Yeah.
Of the conjunto bianco meco, which is the battery of percussion that's used in Abakuá. They're not conga drums, although you've heard a few examples of Abakuá rhythms being played on congas or mimicking the rhythms.
Yeah.
The small drums that are held underneath the arm, except for the bonko chemi, which is a cone-shaped drum that's played with both hands. And of course, obviously, they facilitate being able to march
Right.
indoors, outdoors, etc. Is this the way ritualistically do these drums exist in the same form in the Cross Rivers region, or are they slightly different? Did they evolve in Cuba to a different state?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, the quick answer is yes. It's the same format. On my blog, I have a thing called the globalization of Calabar drums. When I talk all about that, because the structure of those drums, which are found in Calabar and in Cameroon and into Gabon, they have the la cuña, right? How do you call that in English? I forget. Wedge and peg drums. They're also found in Panama, in Colombia, in Venezuela, and there's some examples in Brazil and so on, which is why we can speak of a Carabali diaspora in the Americas. And yes, they're the same type of drum. Cubans tend to use cedar wood, which is what they have, and they use camwood in West Africa generally. But you know, it could be any wood. But the real traditional ones are camwood, and they use antelope skin. In Cuba, they use chivo, goat, because that's what they have. But it's the same setup, the same idea, the same approach to the drums.
And are the drums called the same in the Cross Rivers region?
Well, the Cubans call it cancomo. Cancomo. In Efik, it's ecomo. So you tell me, it's pretty good, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you know, like I said, there's 50 languages in this region, and there's a lot of different names here.
One quick, really quick. In terms, you're talking about the Carabali diaspora. Would you say that the Indian societies in New Orleans, are they representative of this diaspora? There's other elements in those male societies in New Orleans, obviously in the costuming, which is based off of the American Plains Indians, but in terms of their secret nature, their lodges, you have to go through a process of initiation, and you have to have honor, respect, dignity, etc., uphold all those traditions. Would you say that this is part of the diaspora?
I got a shout out to my brother Ivan Watkins, who's a member of the Mardi Gras Indians, the Black Indians in New Orleans, and there's a lot of parallels, definitely, because we have stevedores on the Mississippi River in the Havana docks. We have the masks representing ancestors. And of course, in Cuba, los indios are a very important spiritual power. So I would say that there's a lot more to be researched and understood about that, but definitely New Orleans is the closest thing to what we're in US to what we're talking about in Abakuá.
And
I want to move to channel, just one track of Channel Pozo.
fantastic.
It's very important. This is Arsenio and number 17A, Jorge, por favor. Tuñales Serende. So there's an entry in the book called Aserenda. What does that mean? No one really knows. I used to have this discussion with Goyo Hernandez in Havana because he did a couple of recordings with Tuñali Aserende. Aserende is a common word in Efik language. It means good night. You say mesiere, good morning, Aserende, good night. And to me, it's like buenas noches, mi Congo. They're talking to the ancestors because you're playing at night. That's when the ancestors are awake. And these are phrases put into Cuban popular music through the African descendants to remember where they came from. And they kind of, the meanings have been lost in some cases, but the people continue to sing the songs as historical references to their origins on the continent. So
very similar to us in Puerto Rico in terms of the bomba tradition. We use words in songs, etc. And you ask people, what does it mean? And I goes, I don't know, or well, it's similar to Haitian Creole, that kind of a thing. But the songs still continue to live and are representative of the culture, as long as, like Dizzy Gillespie used to say, as long as there's one black person still left on planet Earth singing the blues, jazz will never die. So
excuse me for
hold on 1 second, Elena, really quick, because I gotta get this question in, and then we'll go to my lovely wife Elena, who's got a bunch of questions here from the list of the viewers. The people in the Cross River region, how do they look at the Abakuá in Cuba? I was present at a beautiful gathering at Joseph Pass Public Theater several years ago. You were there.
Yeah.
Colleague Ecovio, Onem Mulet was there, etc. And I saw them interacting together.
Right.
Abakuá from Cuba and of course from the Calabar region. Is that union, that communication, is it being nurtured? Obviously being nurtured by you, but has it grown?
I think you saw it there in that occasion. I mean,
yeah.
the mask came out, and the Cameroonians, those were guys from Cameroon.
Right.
They were playing, they were gesturing, they were communicating. It was just magic. So there's a lot of enthusiasm because this culture has a lot of stress in Africa itself. Modernity, modern governments. It's not understood very well in Africa. So I think the energy of the Caribbean, the cimarron energy of the Caribbean, is very important to the Africans to show how the Caribbean people resisted against assimilation into European systems. And so I think this kind of bridge building we're trying to do is very useful to learn, and also is useful for parties on both sides of the water to understand the power of what they have.
Great, fantastic. Well, we're going to turn it over now to Elena Martinez, the co-artistic director of, along with yours truly, of the Bronx Music Heritage Center. Ivor has many more examples to play, especially things that many people recognize with La Sonora Ponceña and other great groups in the world we call salsa. But we're going to turn it over right now to Elena Martinez.
So thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Ivor. We have a few questions, and that we're going to take from people who are here. And well, I think we'll be able to get back to the music because some folks have questions related to the music, so we'll probably be able to play some of those things. I'm gonna ask everyone. You can come on, turn on your video, and then I know I'm gonna call you out with your questions, and you can ask Ivor them. But before we get to that, Ivor, I have a couple questions specifically from the book, just because to play off of what Bobby just mentioned about the Mardi Gras Indians and the New Orleans connection. In the book, you mentioned that there's a Haitian connection to Karabali also.
Yeah.
Can you just talk? I mean, I know it's not really known because they keep it really deep down. Can you talk a little bit about that? Mention that.
Yeah, I don't even know it. My friend Heo Ripley, who's part of the Ministry of Culture in Santo Domingo, he's very involved with Haitians, and he's initiated into some of the cultures. He introduced me to a Haitian woman who explained that on a certain day in her area of Haiti, there are rituals that happen, and one of them is called Karabali. And I never got to Haiti to learn more about it, but it's clear that there's a lot of stuff deep inside the cultures of the peoples, protected through initiations that relate to the heritage of this part of Africa, which is why I argue that there's a Karabali diaspora. We can talk about a Yoruba diaspora, Congo diaspora, Arara diaspora, and more. So yes, I'm just trying to open the way so that people can follow. Because I don't got the money to go everywhere or the energy.
Well, that's the next book. That's the next book. But speaking of this book, I will put in the chat the link. So if you're interested in purchasing this, and I think Ivor said until June 30th, which is a few days away, you can get a discount on it. So I will put that information in the
You
chat.
have to have the code.
Yes. Well,
Give
there's a
that.
code in that link. I think the code's in that link. I'll put that in there.
Yeah.
But first, to start with the questions, we have a few questions. Let's start with actually, since also Bobby had talked about the exchange, he saw the exchange when we were at the Public Theater a few years ago with from Africa and the folks here, the Abakuá here from Cuba.
That hooked that up. Yeah.
But Berta Hotar had a question about you. Or you even had that goes further back. You brought Cubans like Roman Diaz over to Africa and had this exchange. And I think Berta, would you like to come on and ask your question about that?
I thank you for the great presentation, Ivor. That was great, like always. And yes, can you tell us a little bit about your experience going back with the Abakuás from Cuba, if the project continues, and if they actually were sharing through ritual ceremonies, or it just became like a cultural exchange? Yeah. How is that perceived, like culture or actual governance and religiosity? Like many questions.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to separate them, but yeah, in 2004, I was able to go to Nigeria, Calabar, major slave port to the Americas. I think the third most important port in the entire slave trade. And the governor of Cross River State, after, well, first of all, I talked to all the chiefs and I showed them, I played like Criolla Carabali by Sexteto Habanero from 1927. And these guys were freaking out saying, this is our culture. And I played them some tracks of Andres Flores, my teacher, who, and I have videos of this on the YouTube channel. And so people just embraced me, and it wasn't, was I going to be initiated? It was, where would I be initiated? Because they wanted to support me. And if I wasn't initiated, I couldn't talk about it. It's like you're off limits. So they gave me the title, which was my passport. And then I came back home, and the government of Cross River State paid for our trip to come back to a festival in December. And it was all last minute. And luckily, Roman Diaz was very enthusiastic. And so was Vicente Sanchez, both members of the same Havana Lodge, Ekweritonko Apapaifi, Ekweritonko Apapaumon. And we all three went together from New York, and we spent a couple weeks in Calabar at a cultural festival. And when the Ekbe people of Calabar saw how deep people like Roman could go, they just brought us into the lodges. They brought them into the lodges. I was already there, and there was very deep exchanges. And there was a lot of plans for the people of Africa to come to Cuba, but things fall apart, as we say in Nigeria. Those plans didn't happen because some people died, and we just couldn't keep the continuity. But there was a huge and profound impact, and some people are still waiting in Calabar for more to happen. But that becomes an issue of who owns the airplanes, who has the funding, not me. So we couldn't carry on, but we're still trying to raise awareness and do more cultural festivals, because there's a lot to talk about at the level of religiosity, at the level of culture, at the level of popular music and enjoyment. And so go to my YouTube channel. There's images of Roman there in Calabar and what he did, and with Vicente.
I could imagine it must have been so moving, and from their side of things,
Yeah.
but also from Roman's side of things. He must have been freaking out in terms of the profoundness of everything.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was no rehearsals. None of this was rehearsed. It just was unfolding naturally, and incredible. Mad respect.
So we have I want to introduce to come on screen Mr. Victor Ekpuk. He had a couple questions and comments, but his last one was about describe the. Well, I'll let him come on. It was about drumming, and he maybe he can come on and talk and ask the question.
Hi, brother Ivor. Nice to see you again.
Thank you so much for being here, brother.
Yeah, I couldn't miss it. So yeah, thanks for this. I had to rush back from my studios just so that I make it on time to be here. I had questions about, perhaps you touched a little bit about, I know in the books, I bought several that I sent to my friends.
Thank you.
Thanks for the discount. So, the book talks about hints on, certain, how a lot of the Cuban phrases, most of them as I'm listening to you and I'm reading the book, are coined out of cross-river languages, especially the BBO and the Efik language. Name some of the word like abasi, the Cubans say obasi. Yeah. You mentioned twins. There was a word for twins again that you mentioned was right. Ba. That is amaniba. That is the BBO word for twins. Words like that. So when I hear things, I just hear slight different pronunciation, but similar meaning or content. And also the music, you mentioned that when the chiefs in Calabar heard the Cuban music, they just exploded. That's what when I'm hearing those drummings, it's really, because Ekpa music is very unique rhythm. Mm-hmm. And that is what I hear in the Abakuá drummings. And, we talked about this the last time I was at the Havana Biennale. And I did a project there, and I invited thanks to the bless his soul, Tato Corinos, who actually helped me with that part of it. He brought in the Abakuá members to come in and perform in my space. And I would say that when I did that drawing, the very first time these guys landed in space, they just suddenly felt at home. And it felt like, for me, it felt like a family reunion. I wanted to go to Cuba to sort of find my ancestors. I know people say you have to come from Americas to Africa to find your ancestors, but I feel that my ancestors were also taken to the Americas. And I believe that I found them, and they came out and they performed, and it was a huge party. And some women broke down in the crowd and cried that during that performance. So it's just moving situations like that. And when I was reading through your book in my studio, I just started coming up with compositions with paintings using Abakuá figures, Abakuá symbols and Sibidi symbols together. So really, thank you a lot for this. Perhaps you can talk about maybe the similarities between the music the Ekbe drummings and the, you know, and the Abakuá rhythm as well.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. And we hope you're going to be a leading participant in whatever we do in the future, bringing people together through the arts. I'm not really qualified to do the comparative music issue because I don't have those skills, but we have people who can do that, and there's obviously a lot of deep continuities. When I play Abakuá music in Calabar, people are always saying that's what our grandfathers used to play, you know, that's how they used to do it. So no doubt, the waters are deep.
Seriously deep. Thanks a lot.
Thank you too, brother.
The best response to that was Cachete Maldonado, the late great Puerto Rican percussionist. I saw him. I was watching him on TV doing a performance with Bata Kumbele, and he was talking about Africa. And the interviewer asked him, "Do you think they like Latin music in Africa?" And he goes, "Of course, our music is their music. Their music is our music." You know, so.
Which reminds me of something, Así son bongo. Así son bongo. That's a popular tune in Cuba. Orquesta Aragon did it, and other people. But in Cuba, to show you how deep the drum is in the culture, what does that mean, Así son bongo? That's how it is, for real. The drum is a symbol of truth. Humans lie. We deceive, we cheat. The drum speaks the truth, which is the voice of the ancestors. And that to me, that kind of says it all. Así son bongo.
From there, actually, I was going to lead into Baba Antonio had some questions, and one of them was about the bongo, and also connection, and also the music in salsa, the references to salsa. But Baba Antonio, do you want to come on screen and ask those questions to Ivor?
Yes, thanks so much, Elena and Bobby, for hosting this. Dr. Miller and I were in Cartagena talking about this about 7, 8, 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And it still resonates in my heart right now, because many of us perhaps on this venue love how Sonora Ponceña, Pete Rodriguez, Pete El Conde, of course, Patato, Julito, Mongo, the composer, Puerto Rican composer, Don Tite Cure Anloso, they flavor with lyrics, words, rhythmic and melodic structure from the Abakuá culture. And I'm just fascinated, especially Sonora Ponceña. Where does this come from? And perhaps it's kind of a broad question, but I like your like we attempted to 9 years ago, your insights into this phenomenon, which is so pleasing to many of us.
Wow. I have to say that Abakuá is a mutual aid system. It's about solidarity. And there's something so attractive about that to people anywhere who are, especially in the working class, and they're struggling. So to see an example of powerful African descendants who are strong and in solidarity, that's attractive. So I think that's part of the reason that, I mean, there's Abakuá tracks in Peru, in Colombia, Puerto Rico, por supuesto, New York, and so on. So it's a great question. I don't know if I can answer it, but we need more research on that.
You did a great job, and it's inspirational for me, and I trust for others. So thank you. Agradecido. Thank you.
Ivor, perhaps you could play a short example of that. I think you have one of the tracks from Sonora Ponceña that that exemplifies.
I don't think Jorge put that on the list, but we do have Yambeke. Jorge, can you manage to get that one up?
Well, while Jorge's looking for that, I have a question.
Yeah, that's number.
He got it.
That's number 16. Yeah. So what we're finding is that in this book I'm trying to write, you know, dealing with Cuban discography is so difficult because a lot of the music has been lost. It's taken out of Cuba. It's in some other country. It gets pirated. No one knows the dates or the real information. And so but I've been trying to track a lot of stuff, and Sonora Ponceña did Yambeke in the 1980s. And the original was somebody in the 1950s in Cuba. But Yambeke is the title of an Iyamba whose name was Chuchu Capaz. He was a white dock worker who learned from the Africans, and he became very important, and he founded 7 lodges. So Yambeke is a very important title, and it turned out to be a song. And people in Cuba were arguing, is Yambeke a creation in Cuba or was it something from Africa? And I was very lucky to find maps of the Cross River area with a river called Yambeke on it. So it's another fascinating example of how the people, the popular masses, kept their history alive.
I learned the word myself from Tito Puente has a piece of music, a jazz mambo he calls Yambeke.
Yeah.
And I remember I asked you about that, you know, in the 1950s on one of his great recordings that he did for RCA. That's what he called the piece. I'm sure he learned that from Mongo Santa Maria, and who was the conga player in his band at the time.
Yamba Yambeke. I wonder if we could hear a bit of that track.
One thing while Jorge's still looking, Ivor, I put the link to the book in the chat. I thought the code was in there. Do you have the code?
Yeah, I do.
For the discount, can you give that to folks so they can go to that link and use it? The link's in the chat, but not the code.
Yeah. Yes, I got the code right here. Where do I put it?
You want to just when the song's on, maybe you can just put it in the chat, and so people can get that to everyone in the chat.
Okay, see the chat, and there it is.
Oh, great. Okay, so it's there. Oh,
yeah,
it's there for everyone.
Abakuá. It's a beautiful track. I was going to end, actually, I'm not sure how much time we have, but I was going to end with a track from Los Van Van, because this track was based on reading Lydia Cabrera's book, La Sociedad Secreta, Abakuá, and I thought that was a fascinating way to end this, by showing how Cabrera's work is feeding back into the popular culture.
Before we do that, Ivor, we have 2 more questions, and one is dealing with the whole issue of women and the female perspective of the Abakuá, and it's interesting because Lydia Cabrera is this woman doing all this work. Vivian Regueros should come on. She has a couple questions about some specific things in the religion, as well as, of course, the artist Belkis, who did a lot of work with Abakuá. So, Vivian.
Yes, Ivor, good evening, and everybody, good evening. I was just wondering, as Elena says, in what capacity do females participate right now, or do they inspire? Are they part of I don't know, in what capacity do you find the female presence? And also, how does the Abakuá lodges or society regard the work of this extraordinary visual artist, Belkis Ailon, that has done so much, to tell the world about this. There was a Museo del Barrio exhibit that she had some years ago that was just exquisite. All the engravings and the paintings, she was so dedicated. So I was wondering how do the Abakuá keep that yin and yang balance? What is the place, let's say, as Sikanekwe was so prominent, where do we find that importance of the female today in the Abakuá?
Yeah. Okay. You know, Alpha and Omega, it's a hard question to answer because there's so many levels, but Sikan is everything in Abakuá. When you understand the ritual theater, everything is about Sikan.
Mhm.
And but that's something that initiates learn over a long period of time by observing and studying and you know, the book we translated, The Sacred Language, it's a conversation amongst title holders. So there's a lot of very deep stuff in the book, and you will find there, those conversations are in there. So that's the myth. The myth is this woman was destined to receive the power, and through her, the society was born. And so all the members worship Sikan. I mean, it's a cult of Sikan, basically. That's the myth. Then Abakuá men who work in the docks are supposed to be family men. You have a job to protect your family. You maintain your children and your wife. That's been, you know, very basic to the culture. And I have a blog where I have a journal called Calabar Ngbe. Calabar Ngbe is a word in Calabar for Ekbe. And I interview women in Cuba, in Abakuá neighborhoods, and they're telling me that, you know, one woman had her quinceañera, her 15th anniversary party inside the lodge, inside inside the famba. So there's a lot of stereotypes that when you look at the lived practice, they just vanish because Abakuá have this reputation of being criminals, of being anti-women. It doesn't play out. That's just what people who don't know talk. So try to check out some of those revistas that I did, because I went into, there's a lot of, Abakuá is also a family tradition. So, you know, when you're doing a family tradition, men, women, children, everyone is supporting the efforts. And so when you go to ceremonies in a place like Positos or whatever neighborhood in San Miguel, you see women there selling food for the people to eat because ceremonies can go on for 3 days. Those women are all parts of Abakuá families. You know, so they're there participating. There's a lot of cases where women are participating in the processions and singing along in certain ceremonies. So yeah, it's very complex, very rich. And yes, Belki's work is just phenomenal. And so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Alpha and Omega, a lot more to talk about there.
So let's just, Ivor, we have 2 questions that I think can go really fast that you might be able to just answer, and we'll just end there. The first, Coach Anderson had a question about the costume, the what they wear, what the Ireme wear. Would you like to come on? Is he still here, Coach? No?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes. Good day, Ivor. I had a question. You know, looking at the traditional Ireme costumes, and then I see that it's some modern day video where they're wearing these almost like Disneyland style designs with big pupsies. You know, it looks like a beetle. I've seen some very things that didn't seem to fit into tradition that are being practiced now in Calabar area. I was curious about that. And also that there's a video of dancing in the streets. It's the title on YouTube in Calabar, and it women dance in a style very similar to Rumba. And I was wondering if that's the only retention of the female NIM society that didn't cross over with the Abakuá into Cuba. So.
I'm not sure exactly what the images you're referring to, but
okay,
in every community in the Calabar region, and this goes all the way up into Cameroon across the border, it's a huge, hundreds of mile long river. There are men's societies and there are women's societies.
okay.
Ekpe is the highest level one, the leopard. Women have their own judicial systems. They pretend to deal with women's matters. It's often called Iban Isong, which means women of the land. That's the Efik version, or it could be Ekpa, which is the Jagam Ekoi version. But there are some Ekpe and Abakuá masks that represent the female. And actually, that mask in Calabar is called Ebonko. Ebonko. And it has the same style that the Cuban one has. It's a triangular cap, and it dances very happily. And that's where women participate in Ekpe. When Ebonko comes out, all the women join, and it's because that's part of the women's culture that entered the Ekpe society, and that's the mask that actually was recreated in Cuba. So that's something that I talk about in my first book, Voice of the Leopard. So there's a lot to talk about because the Ekpe of Calabar went into the Caribbean, but also so did a lot of women's dances, and it all became part of the Calabari universe. Just in the same way as in the Yoruba Lukumi system, different Orishas from different parts of Yoruba land came to be part of one collective, right? Oya is from Takwa, Shango is from Oyo, Yemaya is from Abeokuta, but in Cuba they all became part of one system. The same thing happening in the Calabari, and there's a lot of women's rhythms and dances inside Abakuá. I don't talk about that very much because some people get a little upset about that, but that's what I've been seeing and learning about. So, but they're all ways of conserving culture that came from Africa, to say we are from a place to challenge the curriculum of the educational systems that say Africans are slaves.
Right.
So I hope you understand what I'm saying there.
Fully.
Whatever came over, people try to conserve it.
Right.
And they bring it in and they incorporate it because it's all part of a civilization of Africa that even if it's a male society, women have roles to play there because they're all part of the same family. And so masks do change over time. It's in Calabar, if people imitate Ekpe masks and they're not Ekpe, they will be fined heavily. They will be shut down. But there is, people do innovate and create new masks. And that's probably what you're seeing. I don't know. But
I'll try to send a link.
Be careful what you see on YouTube because you never know.
Well, we have one more question, but before we end with that question, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. As I mentioned earlier, before everyone came on, this is quite the star-studded celebrity Zoom. We have major scholars of Cuban history and music. We have incredible musicians on here. So I want to thank you all for taking part. We want to thank Dr. Ivor Miller for his new book and for this presentation. And we have one more question, and what we'll do after that question, why don't we go right into the last song that Ivor wanted to play and just sort of like end out with that, close with that. But like the last question was Angel Roman, you had a question about some of the popular musical question. Are you here still?
Hi, yes, thank you. Wonderful presentation. Also, I want to link up with Ivor. I'm on the board of Cumbe, which is an Afro-diasporic dance center in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And I think that there may be a way that we could, have some kind of interaction. So I'll talk to Elena about connecting with you. But my question has to do with Miguelito Valdez and singing Babalua Ye and whether the flack that he may have gotten by doing that. and whether he had any connection with the Abakuá tradition.
Yeah, I've never heard of Miguelito having trouble about Babalu, one of the great Orishas in the Arara system. But Miguelito was very close to Chano Pozo. They were like brothers. And so Miguelito helped Chano get a lot of his work out because Chano was so dark-skinned. He wasn't allowed to join certain bands in some of the casinos de la playa, for example. So Miguel was actually representing a lot of Chano's work, and he was apparently deep into the culture of Havana. I think he was a Santiaguero, but I've never heard of him getting any flack. To the contrary, he was seen as a great interpreter of the music of Chano and other people in Havana. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope we'll talk more.
He raps a lot. He uses Abakuá phrases.
Oh yeah.
He's a master blaster, man. In terms of if he was alive today and he was young growing up, he'd be like so innovative, and he was so innovative in his vocal style back then. I think one of the great things that he interpreted that Ernesto Lecuona song beautifully, as did Desi Arnaz, who appropriated it. You have to realize, everybody watching, can you imagine Desi Arnaz is singing on Ernesto Lecuona song about Babalu Aye, the Yoruba deity, Arara deity of sickness, pestilence, on nationwide TV. And of course, mainstream America thought it was just some kind of novelty song. You'd see white kids in playgrounds all across the country going Babalu, but those of us who were hip, like my parents and anybody else from the Caribbean diaspora, Afro-Caribbean diaspora, is looking at that and going, wait a minute, man, this cat is like singing about some heavy, heavy stuff. So kudos to him. I think a lot of people look at him, Desi Arnaz, as just an entertainer and not the real deal. He was the real deal in many, many ways. And there are various examples on the I Love Lucy show where he brings Africa to the forefront in clandestine ways.
But I have to say that Babalu is San Lázaro. And San Lázaro, 17 de diciembre, is one of the most important ritual holidays in Cuba.
Yeah.
Because everybody is looking for protection, for health. Everyone's asking for health. And so it's one of the nationwide deities, like Shango. For sure.
Well, thank you so much, Ivor. Thank you, everyone. You want to set up the last song and we'll close out with that?
Okay, we were going to do something by Yoruba Andabo, but we got no time. We're going to go to 22. This is Los Apapa de Calabar by Los Van Van, recorded in 1999. And Natalie Bolivar, who's been my friend for many years, talked to Juan Formel, the director of Van Van, and learned that they got the lyrics from this song from Lili Cabrera's book, La Sociedad Secreta Abakuá, which we're now translating. So I thought it was just a great example to show how Cabrera, the Homer of the Caribbean, documented things that Caribbean people are now using to recycle back as part of their identity. One thing about this song is Los Van Van apparently never performed this in Cuba because they're not Abakuá members, and the Abakuá didn't like that. It was taboo. So they sang this on international tours, but not in Cuba. So that conservative thing is still going on in some cases.
Todo su juramento. Los mocongos aricuá, son los mocongos que entran monte a buscar su caña. Los mocongos forifarita, son los mocongos que puede entrar, que va a penetrar famba. Los mocongos más chéveres son los mocongos que va a desfilar en la procesión. Tú sabes que el mocongo muchangana son los mocongos que va a la guerra y que va a guerrear.
Yeah, so the phrase there is Mokongo Erikwa Rikwa. that is in Cabrera's book, and so we can show how that that use of the literature, even though Lydia Cabrera was taboo in Cuba for many, many years after she left, it shows that the people brought her back by popular demand.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Ivor. Everyone, thank you so much for coming to this presentation. Please check out what else, other things we're doing. I put our Facebook page, which we're very active on in the chat. So I hope we'll see you at the next one. And go out, get that link and get the code and buy Ivor's book
Yes.
and support.
Yes, indeed. We want to thank Dr. Miller. It's incredible presentation. Just always when we have conversations with I always learn so much, and I'm sure everybody learned a lot tonight. Please get his book. Africa lives in all of us, in all of our culture, whether you know it or not. And is the best thing I could. Oh, and I just want to thank everybody for coming out this afternoon to Co-op City to hear us perform. Thank you so much. We did some Abakuá stuff there, referenced some Abakuá music in our performance. Everybody, thank you so much to my co-artistic director, Elena Martinez. She always comes up with fascinating topics, and this was one of them. And she's the one responsible for this series that we do, Music by the Book. Stay tuned because we will be having more music by the books. I think
Joe Conzo Jr. next month.
The next one will be Joe Conzo Jr. in reference to his book. What's the name of the book, Elena?
Born in the Bronx. Born in the Bronx.
Born in his incredible tome, Born in the Bronx. Dr. Miller, thank you so much. All I can say, I guess I would have to say, Jefe Abakuá Yereka Mokongo Ivor Miller Machevere. In this house, Ivor Miller is the coolest of chiefs.
If I may say something, luz para el espíritu de Lydia Cabrera. Thank you so much for having me on, and we look forward to more.
Fantastic. And if you see any of these books in your travels, ladies and gentlemen, get them because they are fascinating. Just an amazing woman, Lydia Cabrera. We have to do just a show on her. And this is only the first part of this discussion that we've had with Ivor Miller. There will be a part 2 as there's so much to cover in this topic. And as the Abakuá say, Abasi Ekwa Mayabeki, through the drum, God speaks. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.